Hi friends, welcome back to Extraordinary Connections. My name is Dillon Burns, I'm the pastor at Manchester United Methodist Church, and friends, I'm tired. 2 days ago, if you're watching this on Tuesday, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services issued some new guidelines for the next 3 weeks to help prevent the continuing spread of COVID-19, which is so prevalent right now. Guidelines that are going to have a significant effect on how we live, how our churches do their work, potentially even how we worship in our various churches. They're guidelines that I appreciate, and at the same time, as I heard them given in the press conference, it occurred to me that I am just so tired. It's been a long stretch of months. And I was thinking, I am tired to my bones. I am bone weary, which is a bizarre phrase. And so in my tiredness, I thought, well, why don't I follow this rabbit trail? And I went looking for the etymology of the phrase bone weary, by which I mean I Googled bone weary etymology, and nothing came up. Leaves me to just my best guesses, which is that perhaps the bones are just deep down in the body, and so we talk about being bone weary just to say that we're tired all the way down to the deepest parts of who we are. And what do we do when we're bone weary? I wondered, and I turned to Scripture looking for some stories about our bones. And I remembered one of my favorites, the story of a man's bones that stretches across 3 books of Scripture. And it starts in the first, in Genesis. This is the story of Joseph's bones. You may be familiar with Joseph. He had dreams. He was sold by his brothers into slavery, ended up in Egypt, worked his way up the ranks, became the second in command in Egypt, reconciled with his brothers. It's a great story. It takes us all the way to the end of Genesis when Joseph is dying. This is Genesis chapter 50. I'm going to read verse 25. Joseph made Israel's sons promise, "When God takes care of you, you must bring up my bones out of here." One verse later, the book of Genesis ends, Joseph dies, and we move on to Exodus. Exodus is the story of how Moses comes, frees the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, carries them out, takes the people out through the Red Sea on into the desert. And there is one curious verse in there. When Pharaoh has decided, though briefly, to let the Israelites go, Moses goes and collects Joseph's bones. And they carry Joseph's bones through the Red Sea and on into the desert, where they wander for 40 years. Joseph's bones don't get mentioned again until the book of Joshua. After Moses has passed away and Joshua has taken the lead of the Israelites, they've come to the end of their wandering through the desert. They're going into the promised land. And then just in the briefest of mentions, Joshua buries Joseph's bones in the promised land. It's this bizarre thread through these books, Genesis, Exodus, Joshua, but such a valuable one. God had made a promise to the people of God that they would one day have a land of their own, a land of life, of flowing milk and honey. They would one day live in the promised land. Joseph knew this promise. He knew this promise when he came to the end of his life. He trusted in it so much that he told those who were going after him to take his bones with them. And years and years and years later, they did. It occurs to me from this story, as I am weary to my bones, that God answers promises. But it can take a while. That God's timeline sometimes stretches longer than I can see, but we're all living in God's timeline. Sometimes all we can do is keep on keeping on and say to those who come after us, "Take my bones to the promised land." Friends, in whatever length of timeline that we're on, whatever we're in for, let's take each other's bones to the promised land, because God answers God's promises. Thanks be to God. Go in peace.